O'clock, so we're gonna go ahead and get started. We know we only have 30 minutes, so we're gonna try to be concise and give you time for questions. If you do have questions, please post them in the chat. If we have time at the end, we will talk about those things that you have posted. I'm going to introduce our presenters here. So we are going to do the session called Teaching AI Literacy Through Digital Tutorials and Workshop Instruction. Our goal is to provide you with a lot of practical examples. We actually created a tutorial. We're going to walk you through sort of the content in that. At the end of our presentation, we'll have the actual links to those modules if you'd like to check them out after the presentation. And then we'll talk sort of about how workshops might work. So we do encourage our participants to tweet and, like I said, post questions in the chat. So my name is Michelle Shea. I am the co-head of public services here at Texas A&M Central Texas, also the education librarian, and I'm very excited about this topic today. Next, we have Kelly Williams. So I'll let her introduce herself.
Good afternoon. My name is Kelly Williams. I am the reference and instruction librarian here at Texas A&M Central Texas.
And I am Dawndrea Casey. I am a library specialist at Texas A&M Central Texas.
Awesome. Thanks, y'all. So we're going to go to our next slide. We do have the recording enabled, so continuing on. So this whole conference is sponsored by SJSU, which is the San Jose State University School of Information, and they are also supported by the Future of AI initiative, which is partnered with the Learning Revolution community. So that's wonderful. Thank you all so much. We're actually going to jump in now to our content. And here is a list of the modules that we have sort of in our tutorial bank. So we divided our tutorials into 6 modules that align with the Bloom's taxonomy. So we wanted to make sure we moved from sort of lower level thinking activities up towards really advanced level thinking. So progressively going from defining a concept to applying the concept to sort of assessing content and seeing if it is valuable or useful. So you can see we have defining the basic principles of AI, understanding categories of AI, experimenting, which is similar to applying, analyzing outputs, evaluating the impact of AI, and then engaging in discourse. So talking with people beyond that setting about AI practices. Now, I do want to point out that we came up with these categories based on an article, which is linked at the bottom of that slide. So that gave some good learning objectives, which you'll see we've integrated into the tutorials themselves. Next slide. Okay, so I'm going to talk about the first 2 tutorial modules, and then I'll pass it over to my co-presenters. But essentially, the objectives for this first tutorial were to help people understand, like, what is AI, what's Gen AI, what is machine learning. These are all sort of things we've talked about in a general sense, but we wanted our students to understand the specifics of those things while using very approachable, friendly language so that it doesn't seem overwhelming and scary. We also wanted them to understand the difference between narrow and general AI and kind of see that basically what we have now is narrow AI, like Gen AI and everything that's come before it is narrow. Like we've programmed it, we've provided data, it's kind of structured. We haven't gotten to the point where we have strong AI where computers would actually understand emotions or be able to process those sort of things. So the way that we structured every tutorial is we had 2 primary learning objectives, and then we had a series of questions and tasks to consider. We would present the students with a sort of block of text with references and links, and then encourage them after reading those things, please reflect on some of the concepts. So for example, what task can Gen AI do? So, can it create text or images or video? What is machine learning and its benefits? So really talking about, inputting data, having the program look for patterns in the data, and then being able to revise based on input. So just phrasing that in a friendly way. Neural networks, we kind of just touch on layers of understanding. So how when you have more processing power, you can have more layers, which will help the program make better connections between concepts. We've got a great article linked in the actual tutorials that explains all of that in a fantastic way. And then talking about large language models, which are the basis of Gen AI, and then sort of examples. So our goal was not to equate to like a computer science level degree understanding of everything, but just sort of a layman's terms basis. And before we move on, I want to point out the image to the right was actually generated through ChatGPT using a prompt. If you click the link in there, you'll see what prompt I gave it. But essentially, I was asking it, for movies that have displayed AI over time, what would that look like? Give me an image. So that could be something that we could have our students practice too. Continuing on, I just wanted to give you all a couple examples of embedded questions. So these are scattered through every single module, not just module 1. The questions are a mix of open and close-ended. So when we say open-ended questions, we mean like we have a text box, you can type in your response. There is not really a wrong answer per se. It's just us wanting to see what is your current understanding of a concept or idea, or like what do you want to know more about. So you can see that question at the bottom, like why is it important for AI to learn using different types of data? Open-ended. And then we also had a lot of close-ended questions. So those are going to be ones where you can actually check for understanding. As tutorial creators, that helps us see, like if a lot of students are getting a particular question wrong, we can go back and look and say, maybe we need to reword this question because it's not super clear. Or maybe we need to provide more context in the actual tutorial so that they can be more successful. And it then also helps the students sort of validate if they understood something or not. So you can see we've got examples here of a radio response. So that's the one on top where there's only one right answer that you can pick from. And then checkboxes where if you have a range of choices, like which of these tasks could Gen AI do, they can create lists, outline stories, they can categorize data with some human prompting, just sort of to engage students and have them think about the process of understanding the data. You can go to the next slide. Thank you. Okay, so last module I'm going to talk about is our second one. So at this point, we've established a baseline understanding of sort of these definitions of concepts. And then we wanted students to understand the categories of AI. So this chart's a little hard to see, but I have the link there provided if later you want to make it big and pretty and look at it. But essentially, we have data science, artificial intelligence, and machine learning, and then you have concepts nested beneath that. So that's things like deep learning, robotics, expert systems, natural language processing, speech and vision. So the goal of this tutorial was to take those higher level concepts we had introduced in the first tutorial and then sort of talk about those subset categories, which are represented by the little bubbles below. The goal of this, even though essentially students could skip module 1 and 2 and then just jump to our later ones and use Gen AI incredibly successfully, we wanted to at least give them the chance to have this baseline knowledge. So the questions and tasks to consider for this section were things like, are Gen AI reactive or limited memory machines? Hint, hint, they're limited, but and the tutorial explains that. It also talked about open-ended concepts of, what are the advantages or challenges, reflect on that. Which of these categories would you want to learn more about? On our module for the robotics one, we actually link through to our library journals for that subject area and encourage people to, dig a little deeper on an aspect of robotics that interests them, so that they can kind of customize it and personalize it. Then also we integrate a couple of basic scenarios. So that's something that you could do as well if you create modules like this. So I've been talking a lot. I'm going to stop talking. We're going to kick it over to Kelly now. So thank you.
So as Michelle explained, our goal was to kind of build up our models from the ground up, in a sense, the way students were exposed to the very basics of concepts to Gen AI or AI, and then lead to Gen AI and all the way through. So module 3, I talked about or made a tutorial about experimenting with AI tools. I know many students have experience. Everyone has, you have a new iPhone, you have AI on there, there's Gemini, all types of tools. But we still wanted to get students to the fundamental parts of AI, or experimenting with AI tools, excuse me. So the learning objectives for this one were to implement effective strategies for creating prompts for generative AI tools, and discover variations between AI tools and select appropriate tools for individual needs. So in a sense, for this one important part of using Gen AI tools is prompting. Some students think you can enter in any question or prompt that you want, but effective prompting will give you the best output for what you want. So for prompting, some of the things I focused on were telling students they needed to use dynamic verbs, clarify what they want, be aware of their tone, use specific context. Dr. Leo Lowe, the current ACRL president, is very big into AI. So I kind of adapted some of the things he's talked about as well into this module, including being concise. He said define a single clear task, be logical, present information in a sequential, understandable manner. I kind of look at AI as a calculator. You won't get the correct answer unless you put in the correct equation or prompt in this sense. He said be explicit, use specific language, adaptive, refine your prompt based on AI's initial response. So as you get your response, you can adapt it to get what you want, and then reflective. Evaluate the prompt response patterns to change or optimize future interaction. Um, for the tools, I'll show you on the next slide. I won't get into that one. I'll get into that on the next slide. But questions and tasks to consider. How can prompt be worded to get your desired output? Again, I think technically they can enter in any prompt they would like to get the response they want, but if you enter it incorrectly, you will get the output that you actually need or want. And I talked about the next question or task to consider. Identify strengths or weaknesses of different GI tools. I'll show you a chart that I've created in the next module on the next slide, pardon me, and how iterative revisions of prompts improve results. So let me go ahead and take you to the next one so you can see. So this kind of discusses again what I got from Dr. Lowe about being like concise, logical, explicit, adaptive, and reflective. And the image on the screen kind of shows like a breadcrumb trail. That's how I kind of look at it as. You can enter in a simple question, then you adapt it again, adapt it. And then at number 5, it's a very direct and explicit question. For this example, describe 5 popular research topics on early childhood literacy and how it affects academic success later in life. So if you compare question or input 5 to 1, you can see how it has gotten more explicit and direct in the prompting so the students can actually get what they want from the Gen A tool they choose. So on this screen, these are like kind of the 5 popular, in my opinion, Gen I tools. ChatGPT, of course, Claude, Copilot, Gemini, and Perplexity. So in this module, what I also did was I posted this image of the AI tools, and then I had students go through and say, okay, give me one positive, I don't want to say negative, one positive, one drawback of each tool so they can see that. Even though you used to using one tool, another tool, kind of like databases. You have a general database or a subject specific database. ChatGPT can be like a general database in a sense, but Perplexity may be a more specific Gen A tool in a sense. So I had to kind of had them go through and look at, okay, what is this good at and was it not good at? So they can expand their AI tool knowledge. I'm going to go ahead and kick it over to Dawndrea.
Okay, I had modules 4 and 5 for our tutorial. Module 4 really begins to discuss content and the importance of evaluating whether content is human created or it's generated by AI. It's important to discuss what the hallmarks are of AI generated content. So that's really what we look at in this the first part of the module. Next slide. So we're discerning whether content is created by humans or AI, and we do this, and it is important because it's part of information literacy. We're in a digital age right now where it's becoming increasingly difficult sometimes with certain AI-generated materials to tell if they're real or not. And so this falls into information literacy because it equips students with the skills necessary to find, evaluate, use, communicate, and be able to present information in a variety of formats and contexts. And again, like we've already started to see, AI is really blurring the lines between fact and fiction. Next slide. So really where we began to put the evaluation into the hands of the students is in the second part of the module. In the first part, they really just interact with resources that break down the hallmarks of AI-generated content. Basically, here's what you look for, and it's A, B, C, D, and it is almost always the same formula across any type of generative AI. They all kind of do the same things poorly, and we use those as hallmarks to kind of mark that as AI content. So the second part, what we're doing is we're actually giving the students generated content and having them evaluate it on the criteria that you can see on the screen. For the main part of the tutorial, we looked at text because largely that's what we see students using the most. And that's where a lot of the kind of gray areas come in on how we use generative AI. So this essay does two things. It lets them familiarize themselves with what outputs look like, but it also shows the shortcomings. So exercises like this allow us to begin a conversation about what AI can do for us and what we should be allowing it to do. And especially in an academic setting, those two questions are really different. They're really different concepts, and we need students to understand the difference there. Some of the questions are just as simple as like, where do we see bias? Is this clear? Is this coherent? What is the tone? Is the tone natural? Is this how you would write? Those kinds of things are all things that, again, AI, especially generative AI, struggles with. And we really need students to recognize these markers so that they're educated about outputs and so that they can evaluate outputs for their own use. And I want to make a note too, if any of you all go through the tutorial and you look at this AI generated essay, I did it a while back, and actually I went back right at the beginning of this week and I fed ChatGPT, this is ChatGPT version 4, the exact same prompt, which is basically asking for a short discussion about a redemption after the Civil War. And it actually produces a less biased narrative now than it did in the past. And that is because there are people constantly behind the scenes with AI. They're assessing things like bias and inaccuracies, and they do make changes. So do be aware that when you look at that, and if you try to recreate that, you most likely probably will not at this point. Next slide. So in Module 5, we could transition from really looking at different types of AI-generated content, marking, why we think they're AI and how we can evaluate that and other things that we see in the world in general. And we start looking at the societal implications of AI, so more of a global kind of look rather than just how can we identify AI. And this is important because, as we probably already know, AI is ingrained in our society already. It's in everything we do, every shopping we do on the internet. I could go into a million ways that AI is there behind the scenes and we might not even realize it, and especially students may not realize it. But AI is already starting to really affect our lives. And the goal of this tutorial here is to help students understand that they are consumers of AI, whether they know it or not. Even if they don't engage with generative AI tools, they are consuming AI technology, and they need to be conscientious about that. Not just about like how they use ChatGPT, but there are societal implications that they need to be aware of. Next slide. So I just did a quick rundown on this slide of some of the things that the tutorial definitely goes more in depth for. We're getting a little close on time, so I'll just go over them kind of briefly for you. It's important to understand the environmental impacts of AI because they are both negative and positive. We use AI to track how industry releases pollutants, how they can be more efficient in things that would use less resources, but also AI itself uses a vast amount of resources, whether it's water to cool the server stations, or if it's the materials that we mine from the earth that make some of those computers and servers that host those AIs. So we need students to understand the implications so that they can think about the technology that they're using and then they can evaluate sustainability. Bias, I went over that a little bit with the essay. The module touches on that more. But outside of generative AI, it has bias and it has real world consequences. We see it in the criminal justice system. We've seen it in hiring. We've seen it in healthcare. Students need to be aware of these risks and the outcomes of that. And this awareness will foster responsible, hopefully, innovation for future generations. It'll also help them protect themselves from recognizing the patterns, and at least so that they can advocate for solutions that prioritize fairness. Job market, while it has not, AI hasn't made the huge impact we thought it would as quickly as we thought it would. We already know that AI is changing the job market. There's new types of work. It's exacerbating some issues and disparities. We really need students to know this so that they can prioritize where their education is going, what their career paths are, and that they understand the challenges that they might need to start thinking about reskilling or upskilling for the job market as it quickly evolves. Privacy, we know, is a huge concern for AI. It's always collecting data. The people that are having it collect data, monetize this data, students need to be aware of that so they can protect themselves, but also, again, so they can advocate for stronger protections when they are in a place to do so. And finally, the digital divide. Nothing that is technology based is not safe, from being touched with the digital divide. AI tools will probably create barriers. I think we've started to see some, and we'll probably continue to see that, where those who don't have access to those tools and technology are put behind the people who can. And we need students to be aware of that too, because again, advocacy is huge, but also so that they can understand their role in bringing AI to all communities. Tutorials like this can equip students with the knowledge to think critically, make ethical decisions, and participate in discussions about the future of AI and society. And with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Kelly so she can talk to you a little bit more about the discussion portion.
Okay, so in Module 6, I'm engaging with AI discourse. The learning objectives were to plan ways to stay active in conversations about artificial intelligence and to collaborate with other learners to keep up to date on AI developments. I kind of shaped this module after the ACRL framework of scholarships conversation. The goal of scholarships conversation is to kind of create new thoughts, ideas, and collaborate. But with AI, especially large language models, that is not necessarily the case. It's kind of regurgitating what it takes in. It's not creating newer things. So with that in mind, if we're going along with the ACRL framework scholarships conversation, how can we say that AI has discourse per se? So some of the questions or tasks to consider in this regard would be, where can students look to connect with others who use or are interested in AI, and what conversations about AI are happening? Which ones might happen in the future? So some of the suggested ways, again, to kind of shape that ACL framework would be to have students encourage them to follow scholars or experts on AI, to find communities that engage with AI, to engage with generative AI or AI themselves, and to use citations to fact check, as Dawndrea said, she showed in the example essay, or even to track scholarly conversations about AI. So even though AI does not fall under the same umbrella the way we may look at a scholarly creation, discourse in this instant and engaging in it is still very important for students to understand. We for workshop and future plans, we have a I'm gonna go quickly. We have a lot of future plans. We plan some workshops and that involve deciding if we want like longer overview sessions or to schedule mini sessions. We've had students request smaller group mini sessions. We plan to include like hands-on tasks throughout the workshops for participants. These can include drawing visuals to connect ideas, quickly write one sentence summaries to match core definitions, selecting relevant AI tools, using Gen AI in academic setting, which again is very, very important. Students need to understand that some professors may require them to cite what they use, what they put in, things of that nature, and just so much more. And also, hopefully in the future, we plan to have it badged so students can get like different badges for different types of literacies, like news, web, and digital, and now AI. So they can say, okay, I've went through these modules, I've had the foundation, and they can actually go forth and feel comfortable in using these tools. So here are the links to our tutorials. We have about 6 minutes. Um, if you're interested in seeing any of them, reviewing them, well, please contact us and let us know. Here we are. Here's our contact information. We have 5 minutes. Here's
Kelly,
Michelle.
can you go ahead and unmute our moderator? I'm going to start going through the questions since we're short on time. It's Missy Williams, if you can get her. Just to kind of run through the questions I saw. So is this program for students or people in general? What's the intended audience for this curriculum? So this is pretty much for everyone. Anyone can go into our website and take the modules. We don't currently have a sign-in process. We wanted to build like micro-credentials later, and we also have other digital literacies. We talk about web literacy, information literacy, all these things. So we have those available on the web, on our website for people to take. People also asked about monitoring student progress. So we use the LibWizard platform. That's the one that our library purchased to create these modules. And so we can generate spreadsheets on the back end to show all the results of like who took it and what did they respond. We can set it up where they either have to provide their name and student email, or we could just have it do IP addresses or something like that. We can also have it be where it doesn't track those specifics if we don't want that kind of information. And then can students work at their own pace or within the class setting? So we created these modules to be self-paced. Essentially, anyone can take them outside of a class if they want to, but we also are promoting the modules to faculty if they want to require their students take them before doing assignments, just so they know that they have a baseline understanding of AI. Sorry guys, I know we have like 4 minutes. That's why I'm running through quickly. Do you use prompts to search for evidence or research reports? So we, hopefully in that workshop we had talked about, we could spend more time talking with students about here's examples of good prompts and poor prompts, and have them, put those prompts in and iterate on them, and just sort of go from there. But you can always talk to them about being more specific as far as like specify the tone that you want, the formatting, the topic, stuff like that, or like the length. And then accuracy. I know somebody in the chat had put something about like we had things like the CRAP test and radar and RADCAB. That's exactly right. If you've taught information literacy before, students should sort of have these concepts, which dovetails with our other tutorials on information literacy that we have. But we would talk to them about, that Gen AI analysis piece, so the essays. So encourage students to look for like repetition. Are the references inaccurate? Things like that. If you have images, like, do you notice fuzziness or something that might indicate that, it was created in this kind of way? We will pop tutorial links in the chat. We'll get that in a minute. I know many people have asked. And then finally, sorry, I'm talking a lot. How can we tell whether articles original or AI generated? Kind of like I had just mentioned. Kelly had talked about tools like Perplexity. That's really great for pulling web sources and actually showing where those sources came from. For scholarly use, there's an AI tool called Consensus. There's other ones like Research Rabbit, take your pick. But essentially those will show actual like scholarly articles in the world. Otherwise, if you just put a prompt into something like ChatGPT, you're probably going to get hallucinated references, which are just made up ones. Thank you. So I think that was it. I don't know if more questions were asked after that. I'm gonna stop talking now, but
I
I'll
think there
pop
was a
the
couple that
links. Oh, go ahead.
I'm not sure if you answered about, are these copyrighted?
So I just popped the links in the chat as well for the
Thank you.
tutorials. So for we don't currently have them copyrighted so far as, like I said, anyone can access them. We tried very hard to make sure that we cited the sources of where we found all this information. So if you were wanting to recreate it or make sure you're attributing to those creators, like you could go back and read their stuff or see their images. So for us, it was just really about having something our students could take, but also having all of you maybe take a look and pull out what you can to help your own campuses or institutions or libraries, wherever you work.
Okay, great. Thank you. And what forms of motivations do you and your faculty use to encourage students to participate? Is there a certificate, a final test?
So we've talked about having a micro-credential badging at some point. There's another department on campus that is working on a system for that. So once they have that up in place, we're going to partner with them to try to sort of get mini badges for all the literacy tutorials that we've created. Yeah, that was sort of everything that I had. It's about almost 3:30.
Yep, fantastic. Thank you so much. This was a fantastic presentation.
Thank you so much. Thanks to Kelly and Dawndrea for collaborating. Yeah,
All right.
y'all have a
Thank you.
great
We can
day.
stop the recording and hope everyone will join the next sessions, one of the next sessions.